All right, this is a review video for your Properties of Matter quiz. So after you complete this video, you can go ahead and retry your Properties of Matter quiz once you show me your progress that you've completed this. Your goal for this quiz is that you can describe the difference between physical and chemical properties, listing several examples of both. So remember that properties are just attributes or qualities or characteristics of different substances. That's what we're going to be talking about today. There are two different types of properties. There are physical properties and there are chemical properties. And in the Edpuzzle right now, I want you to tell me the difference between the two of them. So the difference between physical and chemical properties is that you can observe physical properties without changing the substance. Okay, chemical properties, when you observe those properties, you have to change the substance. We'll talk a little bit more about that as we go over the specific properties that are physical and chemical properties. So physical properties, there's a bunch of them. Most of these we should be pretty familiar with, but we will pause for a second to discuss a few of them. Number one, color. Pretty obvious. Number two, hardness. Remember that hardness is measured on Mohs scale. So we've talked about hardness in class, and it's on that scale, with 1 being the softest items like talc and 10 being the hardest items like diamonds. Mass. Remember, mass is a measurement of how much matter is in a substance, how much, literally like how many atoms the substance is comprised of and how big those atoms are, how much mass they have. So mass is kind of similar to weight, but just a little bit different. And for 7th grade, we can kind of just think of mass like a unit of weight. It's usually measured in grams. Volume is how much space something takes up. Density is a measure of both mass and volume combined, which is pretty cool. So density, we measure it by saying density is equal to mass divided by volume. So in other words, it's saying mass per unit volume, or mass per volume. And you should be familiar with the word per from math class. Usually when we think of per, we're thinking of unit rates, right? So mass is a unit of density is a unit of mass per volume. And that's really important because it gives us like a standardized measurement. Mass would change. Let's say I had 2 samples of the same type of material, like, I don't know, gold. Why not? I have a sample of gold that's this big and a sample of gold that's this big, right? Obviously, sample 2 here is going to have a higher mass because it's just bigger. But they will have the exact same density because density is a measure of mass per unit volume. So if we were to just cut out like 1 little cubic centimeter of the gold and measured this cubic centimeter versus this cubic centimeter, they would have the same mass, right? So that's what density is basically. The important thing to know is that density relative to water determines whether things sink or float, right? So more dense items sink and less dense items will float in water. Okay. All right. So that is density. Shape is really easy. Texture. How does it feel? Does it have like a slimy texture? Is it fuzzy or furry? Is it smooth? Luster is one that we sometimes forget. Luster determines how shiny something is. So remember that higher luster is going to be shiny. So high luster, just put high L, is equal to shiny. And sometimes we can even refer to things as having like a metallic luster because metals usually have high luster. Malleability, can it be hammered into sheets? Okay, malleability is a property of metals that says that we can take metals and hammer them into sheets without them breaking. We can kind of mold them and shape them how we want. Okay, 2 more physical properties. Number 1, conductivity. Conductivity of electricity. So if it conducts electricity, if it allows electricity to flow through it easily, like most metals do, it is conductive. And we can also have thermal conductors that let heat pass through them very easily, like pots and pans, also usually metals. That's why your pots and pans are usually made out of metals, like maybe steel or carbon or even copper, because they let the heat from the burner pass on to your pan, and then the pan lets the heat pass on to your food to cook it. Okay, so that's conductivity. Chemical properties, there's 2 of them, 2 big ones that we'll talk about: flammability and reactivity. Flammability is literally just, does it catch on fire? Is it flammable? Okay. Reactivity determines whether or not two substances react together. Do they react to form a new substance? Now, the difference between chemical properties and physical properties, if we go back to these physical properties, you can test every single one of these without changing what the substance is. I can take a hammer to a substance to test if it's malleable. It might break, but it's still going to be the same substance. Same with any of the other ones. Color, hardness, we can test them without changing the substance. Chemical properties, when we test to see if something is reactive and we combine it with another substance, if it is reactive, it's going to form something new. So it's going to change the substance. Same with flammability. When we test to see if it is flammable, if it will catch on fire, it's going to create something new. It's going to change the substance. All right. This is a review question from your quiz that if you struggled on your quiz, it was probably because of this one. So the quiz question was asking, what property can you sort these by where you can't create more than one group? So that means that for that specific property, each of these items is the same. So let's say we were sorting by magnetism. How many groups could you sort this into if you were sorting them by whether or not they were magnetic? So hopefully you said probably 2 groups. You might be able to do more than 2 groups, but I would say 2 groups. You would have a magnetic group and a non-magnetic group, and that's the only 2 groups you could sort these into, right? I would say the plastic ruler is not magnetic. I'll put PR for plastic ruler. The paper clip is magnetic, right? So you could sort this into 2 groups. You could maybe even do 3. You could do stuff that's very magnetic or maybe not as magnetic. I'm not sure if that would actually work or not, but you could try it. What about mass? How many groups could you sort this into for mass? Okay, hopefully you said 2 or more, because you could sort this into a bunch of groups, right? Each one of these items probably has a different mass. So I could probably sort them all. I could sort it into 8 groups because they all have a unique mass, okay? So for that particular quiz question, you're looking for the property that all of these items are exactly the same. There's no difference. There's no way we could sort them into 2 groups based on that property. All right, hopefully that makes sense. That's the last thing I got for you on this particular review. If you have any questions, please ask me. Make sure you play the little review game, and then you can retake your quiz. All right, good luck.